A whisper of truth. David Callahan was the epitome of success in the cutthroat world of business. As the CEO of Callahan Innovations, a company renowned for pioneering cutting-edge technology, he had achieved a reputation for vision and integrity. However, even visionaries had their moments of doubt, and today was one of those days. David adjusted his cufflinks and gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his high-rise office, the sprawling city below humming with life. His thoughts were consumed by the deal awaiting him at a lavish downtown cafe, a deal that could elevate his company to global prominence. At the heart of this monumental negotiation was his best friend and business partner, Aaron Whitaker. Aaron had been with David since the early days when they were just two ambitious men with a shared dream. Over the years, their bond had been tested and fortified by challenges and triumphs. Together, they had built an empire. Trusting Aaron was second nature to David, which made the unease creeping into his mind all the more unsettling. He shook off the feeling, attributing it to the gravity of the upcoming deal. As he prepared to leave, his assistant, Karen, handed him a folder containing the final details of the contract. "Good luck, Mr. Callahan," she said with a warm smile. "This is it, the big one." David nodded, forcing a smile. "Thanks, Karen. Let's hope it's the start of something extraordinary." The cafe where the meeting was set was a haven of opulence, frequented by the city's elite. As David entered, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft murmur of conversation greeted him. Aaron was already seated at a corner table, his demeanor relaxed as he scrolled through his phone. David approached with a nod, his handshake firm. "Ready for this?" Aaron asked, grinning. "As ready as I'll ever be," David replied, sliding into his seat. The contract lay between them, a tangible representation of years of hard work. Minutes turned into an hour as they discussed the finer points of the deal. David excused himself to the restroom, leaving Aaron at the table. As he walked away, he failed to notice the subtle change in Aaron's expression, a flicker of something darker beneath the easy charm. Nearby, Emily Grant, a waitress at the cafe, was busy clearing tables. She wasn't one to eavesdrop on customers, especially not the wealthy clientele who frequented the establishment, but something about the low, urgent tone of Aaron's voice drew her attention. He was speaking into his phone, his words sharp and deliberate. "Everything's in place. Once he signs, the company's mine. Callahan won't see it coming." Emily froze, the water pitcher in her hand trembling slightly. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. This wasn't just any betrayal. This was a plot to destroy a man who clearly trusted Aaron implicitly. Her gaze shifted to David's empty chair, then back to Aaron, who was still engrossed in his conversation. She felt an overwhelming urge to do something. But what? She was just a waitress, an invisible presence in the world of power and privilege. What could she possibly do to intervene? David returned to the table, his expression calm as he resumed his seat. Aaron flashed his usual charismatic smile, but Emily could see through the facade now. Her mind raced as she wrestled with a decision. Should she risk her job and confront David, or should she stay silent and let the betrayal unfold? As the two men continued their discussion, Emily lingered near the table, pretending to arrange cutlery. She finally mustered the courage to act. Clearing her throat softly, she stepped closer to David and whispered, "Excuse me, Mr. Callahan. Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" David looked up, his brows furrowing in mild surprise. "Of course," he said, standing and following her to a quieter corner of the cafe. Emily's heart pounded as she spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "I don't mean to intrude, sir, but I overheard something I think you need to know. Your partner, Mr. Whitaker, he's planning to betray you. He was just on the phone, saying that once you sign the deal, the company will be his." David's eyes widened slightly, disbelief etched on his face. "Are you sure about this?" "I swear, sir," Emily said earnestly. "I know it's not my place, but I couldn't stand by and say nothing." David's mind raced. Aaron, his closest ally, plotting against him. It was almost too absurd to consider. but there was something in Emily's demeanor, her sincerity, her courage, that made him pause. "Thank you for telling me," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'll handle it." Emily nodded, relief washing over her. As David returned to the table, she watched him closely, hoping her warning hadn't fallen on deaf ears. Back at the table, Aaron greeted him with the same disarming smile. "All good." "Just fine," David replied, his tone measured. He picked up the contract, his mind now working overtime. He needed to tread carefully, to verify Emily's claims without tipping his hand. As the meeting concluded and Aaron left the cafe, David stayed behind, his thoughts churning. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Julian, it's David. I need you to look into something for me. Discreetly." The storm was just beginning. Shadows of doubt. David Callahan sat in his car outside the cafe, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. The bustling city around him seemed distant, his thoughts consumed by the waitress's unexpected warning. Emily's words echoed in his mind. "He's planning to betray you." Could it really be true? Could Aaron, his most trusted friend, the man who had stood by him for over a decade, be capable of such treachery? It felt impossible. Aaron had been there through everything. The late nights, the scrapped prototypes, the endless investor pitches. Together, they had built Callahan Innovations from a dream into a juggernaut. And yet, Emily's earnestness was hard to ignore. She had nothing to gain and everything to lose by speaking up. David sighed and started the car. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Back at the office, David walked through the sleek, glass-paneled corridors with a purposeful stride. He stepped into his private office and closed the door behind him. Sinking into his leather chair, pulling out his phone, he dialed Julian Reeves, a private investigator he had worked with years ago on a sensitive case. "Julian Reeves," the gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Julian, it's David Callahan. I need your help." "David," Julian said, his tone shifting to a mix of curiosity and concern. "What's going on?" David hesitated for a moment before explaining. "It's about Aaron Whittaker. I need you to look into him, discreetly." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Aaron, your partner? What are you suspecting?" David clenched his jaw. "I don't know yet. Someone told me he might be planning something that could harm the company." Julian didn't press further. "Understood. I'll dig into his recent activities and get back to you. Give me 48 hours. "Thanks, Julian. And remember, this stays between us." After hanging up, David leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. He couldn't believe he was doing this, investigating Aaron, of all people. But Emily's warning had planted a seed of doubt that he couldn't ignore. Until Julian returned with answers, David knew he had to play his part perfectly. The next morning, David arrived at the office early, hoping to focus on work and distract himself from the situation. But Aaron was already there, sitting in David's office with a coffee in hand. "Morning, partner," Aaron greeted with his usual enthusiasm. "Thought I'd stop by early to go over a few details before the deal's finalized." David forced a smile, masking the unease swirling inside him. "Sure. Let's get to it." Aaron's demeanor was as charming and confident as ever. He joked about their humble beginnings, reminisced about the nights they'd spent brainstorming in a tiny garage, and talked about the bright future ahead. To anyone else, he would have seemed completely genuine. But to David, there was something about Aaron's words, too polished, too rehearsed, that set off alarm bells. As they reviewed the contract, David noticed small changes that hadn't been there before. Clauses about ownership rights and intellectual property were worded ambiguously, leaving room for interpretation. It wasn't enough to raise immediate suspicion, but it added to the growing unease. "Are these new?" David asked, pointing to one of the clauses. Aaron glanced at it and waved dismissively. "Oh, just minor adjustments. The lawyers thought it would clean things up a bit. Nothing to worry about. David nodded slowly, not wanting to tip his hand. Makes sense. I'll give it another read tonight. Of course, Aaron said, his grin unwavering. I trust you'll see everything's in order. David's stomach churned. Aaron's confidence now seemed less like camaraderie and more like arrogance. Later that evening, David met with Julian in a discreet cafe on the outskirts of the city. Julian's expression was grim as he slid a manila folder across the table. You're not going to like what I found, Julian said. David opened the folder and felt his heart sink. Inside were detailed reports of Aaron's activities over the past year. There were records of funds being quietly siphoned from company accounts into offshore holdings, all in Aaron's name. Emails showed communication with competitors, discussing potential buyouts and technology transfers. The funds are significant, Julian explained. He's been moving them in small amounts to avoid detection, but it adds up to millions. And these emails, he's been laying the groundwork for months to take control of the company. If you sign that deal, he'll have the leverage he needs to push you out. David's hands tightened around the folder. I trusted him. We built this company together. Julian leaned forward. I get it, David. But trust isn't enough in this world. You need to protect yourself, and fast. David nodded, his mind racing. What do I do? First, freeze the accounts he's been using. You have enough evidence to justify it. Then confront him, but only when you're ready to act. Don't give him time to cover his tracks. David closed the folder, his resolve hardening. Thank you, Julian. I'll take it from here. The next day, David took the first steps to secure the company. He met with his legal team and instructed them to freeze the suspicious accounts and tighten security measures. He also had them review the contract Aaron had presented, looking for any potential loopholes. But David knew the confrontation was inevitable. He needed to face Aaron directly and put an end to this betrayal. That evening, David invited Aaron to a private meeting at the office. Aaron arrived with his usual charm, carrying a bottle of whiskey to celebrate the upcoming deal. What's the occasion? Aaron asked as he entered the conference room. David gestured for him to sit. We need to talk. Aaron's smile faltered for a moment before he recovered. Sure, what's on your mind? David slid the manila folder across the table. This. Aaron's expression darkened as he opened the folder and saw the evidence. For a moment, he seemed stunned, but then his smirk returned. Well, Aaron said, leaning back in his chair, I guess the game's up. David's voice was cold. Why, Aaron? After everything we've been through, why would you do this? Aaron's smirk twisted into a sneer. Because I'm tired of playing second fiddle, David. You get all the credit, all the glory, while I'm stuck in your shadow. This company wouldn't exist without me, and I'm done waiting for you to acknowledge that. David's anger boiled over. You could have talked to me. We could have worked something out. But instead, you chose to stab me in the back. Aaron stood, his tone venomous. You wouldn't have listened. You're too busy being the hero. Well, guess what? Heroes fall. David rose to his feet, his voice steady. Not this time. The accounts are frozen. The evidence is with my legal team. It's over, Aaron. Aaron's face twisted in rage. You think you've won. This isn't over, David. I'll make you pay for this. David didn't flinch. Get out. Aaron stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. David sank back into his chair, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him. But amidst the anger and sadness, there was also relief. He had acted before it was too late. As David stared out the window at the city lights, he realized the fight wasn't over. Aaron would retaliate. He was certain of it. But David was ready. With his resolve steeled, he picked up the phone and made another call. Julian, it's me again. We're not done yet. The web of retaliation. The next morning, David Callahan walked into his office with a renewed sense of purpose. He had spent a restless night replaying his confrontation with Aaron. Every word, every expression etched into his mind. Despite the bitterness of betrayal, he was determined to protect what he had built, no matter the cost. Karen, his assistant, greeted him with a concerned look. "Mr. Callahan, we've been getting calls all morning. Investors, board members, even a couple of journalists. They're asking about rumors." David froze mid-step. "Rumors? What kind of rumors?" Karen hesitated, then handed him a tablet displaying the headline of a prominent business blog. "Scandal at Callahan Innovations. Allegations of financial misconduct surface." David's chest tightened as he read the article. It was filled with damning accusations: embezzlement, unethical business practices, offshore accounts. The article painted David as a corrupt CEO who had been funneling company money for personal gain. While most of the claims were baseless, there were just enough kernels of truth, twisted and exaggerated, to make the story seem credible. "This is Aaron," David said, his voice tight. "He's trying to smear me." Karen nodded. "What do we do?" David set the tablet down with a determined expression. "We fight back. Get my legal team on the line. And call Julian. I need him here immediately." An hour later, Julian Reeves arrived, his demeanor as grim as the situation. "I saw the article," he said, dropping his bag onto the conference table. "Aaron's playing dirty." David nodded. "He's using the media to turn people against me. Investors are already calling, worried about the company's future." Julian leaned forward. "We need to get ahead of this. I've already started contacting the journalists behind the article. Most of them won't listen, but we can challenge the story with hard evidence. The good news is, we have plenty of it." David frowned. "But this isn't just about facts, Julian. Perception matters. If people believe these lies, it could take years to rebuild my reputation. That's why we need to play smart," Julian said. "We'll release a statement to the press addressing the accusations point by point. Transparency is your best weapon right now. But we also need to think about Aaron's next move. He's not done." David sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "What do you think he'll do next?" Julian's expression darkened. "If I know Aaron, he'll try to isolate you. He'll go after your allies, board members, key investors, anyone who can sway the company's direction." David nodded slowly. "Then we need to make sure those people stay on our side." That afternoon, David held a private meeting with the company's top executives and board members. The room buzzed with tension as they took their seats, their faces a mix of concern and curiosity. "Thank you all for coming," David began, his tone calm but resolute. "I'm sure many of you have seen the articles circulating about me and this company. I won't mince words. These accusations are lies, fabricated by someone who wants to see us fail." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But I'm not here to ask for sympathy. I'm here to show you the truth." David gestured to the screen behind him, which displayed documents, emails, and financial records. With Julian's help, he had compiled a thorough rebuttal to every claim in the article. He walked the group through each piece of evidence, explaining how Aaron had manipulated the facts to frame him. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Then one of the board members, an older man named Charles Harper, spoke up. "This is damning evidence against Aaron, but how can we be sure he won't escalate this further?" David straightened. "We can't control Aaron's actions, but we can control how we respond. I need your trust and support to weather this storm. Together, we can protect this company and everything we've built." There were murmurs of agreement around the table. David could see the shift in their expressions, the doubt giving way to determination. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. But Aaron wasn't backing down. The next morning, another article appeared, this time accusing Callahan Innovations of exploiting workers in its overseas manufacturing plants. The claims were equally baseless, but they sparked outrage on social media. The hashtag #BoycottCallahan began trending, and protesters gathered outside the company's headquarters. David watched the chaos unfold from his office window, his jaw clenched. "He's turning public opinion against us," he said to Julian, who was seated across from him. Julian nodded grimly. "This isn't just about business anymore. Aaron wants to destroy your name." David took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "Then we need to shift the narrative. If we let him control the story, we've already lost." Julian leaned forward. "What's your plan?" David's eyes hardened. "Transparency. We'll invite the media to tour our facilities, meet our workers, and see firsthand how we operate. We'll show them the truth." Over the next few days, David launched a full-scale campaign to counter Aaron's attacks. He held press conferences, released detailed statements, and gave interviews to trusted journalists. He even invited reporters to visit the company's overseas factories, where they documented the fair wages, safe working conditions, and employee satisfaction that contradicted Aaron's claims. Meanwhile, Emily, the waitress who had warned David about Aaron, became an unexpected ally. After hearing about the media firestorm, she reached out to David, offering to testify about what she had overheard at the cafe. "You don't have to do this," David told her when they met in his office. "This could put you in the spotlight, and it won't be easy." Emily squared her shoulders. "I've already made my choice, Mr. Callahan. I know what I heard, and I can't stand by while someone like Aaron tries to tear you down." David smiled, touched by her courage. "Thank you, Emily. Your support means more than you know." With Emily's testimony, David's legal team filed a lawsuit against Aaron for defamation and fraud. The lawsuit made headlines, shifting public focus back to Aaron's misdeeds. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. But Aaron wasn't done yet. Late one night, David received an anonymous tip. Aaron was planning to leak confidential company information to one of their biggest competitors. If the leak went through, it could jeopardize years of innovation and give the competitor a significant advantage. David immediately called Julian. "We need to stop this now." Julian didn't waste time. "Leave it to me. I'll track the leak and shut it down." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity as Julian and his team worked tirelessly to intercept the data. It was a race against time, but in the end, they succeeded. The leak was traced to a rogue employee working under Aaron's orders, who was promptly arrested. When news of the thwarted leak broke, it was the final blow to Aaron's credibility. The media turned against him, investors rallied behind David, and the company's stock began to recover. As the dust settled, David sat in his office, reflecting on everything that had happened. He had survived the storm, but it had come at a cost. The betrayal still stung, and the scars it left would take time to heal. But he was stronger now, more determined than ever to protect what he had built. Emily knocked on the door and stepped inside. "Mr. Callahan, I just wanted to check in." David smiled. "Emily, come in. I was just thinking about everything you've done for me. I don't know how I can ever thank you." Emily shook her head. "You don't need to thank me. I just did what was right." David nodded, his expression thoughtful. "People like you are rare, Emily. If you ever want a job here, consider it yours." She smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan. That means a lot." As she left, David turned back to the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. He had won this battle, but he knew there would be more challenges ahead. Still, with allies like Julian and Emily by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. Rebuilding trust. The weeks following Aaron's downfall were chaotic but promising. David Callahan poured his energy into repairing the damage left in Aaron's wake. Every day brought new challenges, addressing investor concerns, rebuilding the company's image, and ensuring employees felt secure. But for every hurdle he faced, there was also progress. David's first priority was to restore trust, both internally and externally. He held company-wide meetings to reassure employees and bring transparency to what had happened. Standing in front of hundreds of staff members, he spoke candidly about the betrayal. "I won't pretend the past few weeks haven't been difficult," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "Someone I trusted with everything turned against us. But this company isn't built on one person. It's built on all of you, your dedication, your ideas, your hard work. Together, we're stronger than any challenge." The room erupted in applause. Though skepticism lingered in some faces, David could see the beginnings of trust being rebuilt. Externally, David launched a strategic campaign to rebuild the company's image. It wasn't just about damage control. It was about showcasing Callahan Innovations as a leader in ethical business practices. This included opening the company's books to third-party auditors, highlighting their commitment to sustainability, and sharing employee stories of growth and opportunity. The transparency paid off. Positive media coverage began to outweigh the scandalous headlines Aaron had fueled. The company's stock rebounded, and investors who had wavered began returning with confidence. Still, David knew the battle wasn't over. Aaron had gone underground after the lawsuit was filed, but his silence was unsettling. One afternoon, as David reviewed reports in his office, Karen stepped in with a familiar face behind her. "Mr. Callahan," she said, smiling. "Emily's here to see you." David looked up, a genuine smile crossing his face. "Emily, good to see you. Come in." Emily entered, clutching a folder. Her confidence had grown since their first meeting, but there was still a hint of nervousness in her demeanor. She sat across from David and placed the folder on his desk. "I've been keeping track of things," she said. "The news coverage, public sentiment, everything. I thought it might be helpful." David opened the folder and was immediately impressed. Inside were detailed clippings of articles, social media trends, and even suggestions for how the company could further improve its messaging. "This is incredible," David said, looking up at her. "You've done all this on your own." Emily nodded. "I figured it was the least I could do after everything. I didn't want to just sit back while you're out there fighting." David leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've got a sharp mind, Emily. Have you ever thought about working in public relations?" Her eyes widened. Not really. I've been a waitress for so long, I never considered something like this." "Well, consider it now," David said. "I'd like to offer you a position here. You've already proven your loyalty and talent. We could use someone like you on the team." Emily blinked, clearly taken aback. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," David replied with a warm smile. "I promise you won't regret it." After a moment, Emily nodded. "Yes, I'd love to." As Emily settled into her new role, she quickly became an integral part of the company's recovery efforts. Her insights into public perception were invaluable, and her ability to connect with people, employees, investors, and even the media, brought a fresh perspective to the team. One day, as they worked late in the office, David and Emily shared a moment of reflection. "You know," David said, leaning back in his chair, "if you hadn't spoken up that day at the cafe, I don't know where I'd be right now. Aaron could have destroyed everything." Emily smiled. "I'm just glad I did the right thing. But honestly, you've inspired me just as much. The way you've handled everything, it's been incredible." David looked at her, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing his face. "It hasn't been easy, but knowing I have people like you and Julian by my side makes it possible." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the past weeks slowly lifting. But just as things seemed to stabilize, Julian called with troubling news. "David," Julian said, his tone urgent. "Aaron's resurfaced. He's been meeting with a group of rogue investors." David frowned. "Rogue investors? What are they planning?" "It's not entirely clear," Julian replied. "But from what I've gathered, they're looking for ways to challenge your leadership. They're trying to undermine you from within." David's grip tightened on the phone. "Do we have names?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it. In the meantime, be prepared for anything." This isn't over. David ended the call, his mind racing. Aaron wasn't just trying to ruin his reputation. He was trying to dismantle the company from the inside. The battle was far from over. The next day, David called an emergency meeting with his executive team. "We've received credible information that Aaron is working with rogue investors," he explained. "Their goal is to destabilize the company and challenge my leadership." The room buzzed with tension. Charles Harper, the board member who had been a staunch ally, spoke up. "What can we do to counter this?" David leaned forward, his expression resolute. "We strengthen our foundation. We focus on transparency, innovation, and results. If we show our stakeholders that we're stronger than ever, Aaron's plans will fall apart." Emily, seated at the far end of the table, raised her hand. "I have an idea. What if we launch a new initiative, something that highlights the company's values and engages the public, something Aaron can't attack?" David nodded. "Go on." Emily outlined a plan for a company-wide innovation challenge, inviting employees from all levels to pitch ideas for new products or improvements. The winning ideas would be funded and implemented, showcasing the company's commitment to creativity and collaboration. "That's brilliant," David said. "Let's make it happen." Over the next few weeks, the Innovation Challenge became a company-wide phenomenon. Employees submitted hundreds of ideas, and the excitement was palpable. The media picked up on the initiative, praising Callahan Innovations for fostering a culture of inclusion and forward thinking. Even as Aaron's rogue investors tried to sow doubt, the positive momentum from the challenge made it harder for them to gain traction. David remained vigilant, but for the first time in weeks, he felt like he was one step ahead. One evening, as David reviewed the finalists' ideas for the challenge, Julian called again. "I have good news," Julian said. "We've identified the rogue investors. I've sent their information to your legal team. They've been violating corporate bylaws, and you have grounds to remove them." David's jaw tightened. "Then that's exactly what I'll do." Within days, the rogue investors were ousted, their schemes falling apart. With Aaron's allies gone, his influence dwindled. The company emerged stronger, its foundation more secure than ever. As David stood on the stage at the Innovation Challenge's final event, he looked out at the audience. Employees, investors, and even journalists. The energy in the room was electric, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had plagued them weeks ago. "This challenge isn't just about ideas," David said, his voice steady. "It's about who we are as a company. It's about resilience, creativity, and integrity. Together, we've proven that no challenge is too great. We've come through the fire stronger than ever." The crowd erupted in applause, a standing ovation that filled the room with hope and pride. David smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. He had faced betrayal, fought back against the odds, and emerged victorious, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in him. As he left the stage, Emily approached, beaming. "That was incredible, Mr. Callahan." "Call me David," he said, smiling. "And thank you, Emily. None of this would have been possible without you." She blushed slightly but held his gaze. "It's been an honor." David nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. The storm was over, but the journey was just beginning, and he was ready for whatever came next. The depths of deception. David Callahan's relief at regaining stability was short-lived. Just when he believed the worst was behind him, Julian called again with an ominous update. "David, we've uncovered something new," Julian began, his tone heavy. "Aaron's been working on another angle, a shadow campaign to disrupt your supply chain." David frowned, gripping the phone tighter. "How? What's he doing now?" Julian sighed. "He's been contacting key suppliers, spreading false claims about your company's solvency. Some of them are starting to pull back on contracts, worried they won't get paid." David felt his stomach drop. The supply chain was the backbone of Callahan Innovations, especially with their newest products in development. Any disruption could derail months of progress and jeopardize future deals. "Do we have proof?" David asked. "Not yet, but I'm close. I've tracked some of the conversations to an intermediary Aaron's been using, a consultant with ties to one of your competitors. I'll get the details, but you need to act fast. If too many suppliers pull out, it could spiral out of control." David clenched his jaw. "Do whatever it takes to get me that proof." David immediately convened a crisis team, bringing in his top executives, legal counsel, and PR team, including Emily, whose sharp instincts had become indispensable. "We have a new threat," David announced, pacing at the head of the conference table. "Aaron is targeting our suppliers, trying to weaken us from the inside. We need to move quickly to reassure them and stop this campaign before it gains traction." Charles Harper, the board member who had been a steady ally, spoke up. "How do we counter something like this without proof? If we overreact, we might validate the very rumors he's spreading." David nodded. "We'll start by reaching out to every key supplier directly. Reassure them of our stability, show them the strength of our financials, and offer incentives to solidify their commitments." Emily raised her hand. "We should also create a public-facing strategy. If any of these rumors reach the media, we need a preemptive narrative that reinforces our credibility." "Good idea," David said. "Emily, you'll work with the PR team on that. Julian's still working to track Aaron's movements, but until we have concrete evidence, we need to stay ahead of this." The team left the meeting energized but wary, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. Over the next several days, David and his team worked tirelessly. Emily led a PR campaign that emphasized Callahan Innovations' commitment to innovation and trust. The company hosted supplier appreciation events and publicly announced new partnerships to showcase its stability. Behind the scenes, David personally reached out to longtime suppliers, assuring them of the company's strength and addressing any concerns they had. Some were reassured, but others hesitated, their confidence shaken by Aaron's lies. "It's like trying to patch a sinking ship," David confided to Emily during a late-night meeting. "For every supplier we convinced to stay, 2 more expressed doubts." Emily leaned forward, her eyes bright with determination. "Then we keep patching until the ship isn't sinking anymore. We've been through worse, and we'll get through this too." David smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. "You're right. We've come too far to let Aaron win now." Just when the situation seemed under control, Julian called with a breakthrough. "David, we've got him," Julian said, his voice triumphant. "Aaron's been working through a consultant named Victor Kane. Kane has a history of corporate sabotage, and we found records of his communications with several of your suppliers. It's all tied back to Aaron." David's heart pounded. "Do we have enough to take action?" "More than enough," Julian confirmed. "Your legal team can file an injunction against Aaron and Kane. We can also use this to reassure your suppliers. It's undeniable proof that Aaron's behind the rumors." David wasted no time. He called an emergency meeting with his legal team and had the injunction filed within hours. The next day, Callahan Innovations released a public statement exposing Aaron's sabotage, backed by hard evidence. The media pounced on the story, painting Aaron as a disgraced schemer whose vendetta had spiraled out of control. The fallout was swift. Suppliers who had hesitated quickly recommitted to Callahan Innovations, and new opportunities emerged as the company's resilience became a headline in itself. Investors, impressed by David's ability to navigate yet another crisis, doubled down on their support. Meanwhile, Aaron's reputation was in tatters. His attempts to retaliate through back channels were thwarted by David's increasingly robust defenses, and his few remaining allies abandoned him as the truth came to light. But David wasn't done yet. He knew Aaron's actions had caused significant damage, and he was determined to hold him accountable. One evening, as the office began to quiet, David called Julian. "I want to take this further," he said. "Aaron's not just a rival. He's a criminal. I want to pursue criminal charges for the damage he's caused." Julian's voice was cautious. That's a big step, David. Are you prepared for the fight that comes with it? David's eyes hardened. I spent weeks cleaning up his mess. He needs to face the consequences, not just for me, but for everyone who's been hurt by his greed. The decision to pursue criminal charges marked a turning point. David's legal team worked tirelessly to build a case, collaborating with law enforcement to ensure Aaron would be held accountable. The process was grueling, but David's resolve never wavered. Through it all, Emily remained by his side, offering ideas, encouragement, and an unshakable belief in his leadership. One evening, as they reviewed documents together, she looked up at him and said, "You're not just fighting for this company. You're fighting for everyone who believes in what it stands for." David nodded, her words striking a chord. "That's exactly why I won't stop. Aaron wanted to destroy us, but all he's done is remind me why this company matters." Months later, as David stood on stage at a major industry conference, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The company was thriving again, stronger than ever thanks to the resilience and dedication of its people. The innovation challenge had led to groundbreaking new projects, and the public's faith in Callahan Innovations had been restored. As he concluded his keynote speech, the audience rose to their feet in applause. David smiled, feeling a sense of pride and gratitude that went beyond words. In the crowd, he spotted Emily, her smile as bright as ever. She had become more than an ally. She was a symbol of the courage and integrity that had carried them through the storm. Later, as they celebrated the company's success with the team, David raised a glass and said, "Here's to the people who make this company what it is. Together, we've proven that no challenge is too great, no betrayal too deep, to keep us from achieving greatness." The room erupted in cheers, the sound a testament to the unbreakable spirit of Callahan Innovations. And as David looked around at the faces of those who had stood by him, he knew they were ready for whatever the future held. Redemption and legacy. David Callahan woke before dawn, the city skyline just beginning to glow with the first rays of sunlight. Today wasn't just another day. It marked a year since Aaron's betrayal had turned his world upside down. It was a day of reflection, a day to take stock of what had been lost, what had been saved, and what had been rebuilt. In the months since Aaron's final attempt at sabotage had been thwarted, life at Callahan Innovations had settled into a rhythm of progress and healing. The criminal charges against Aaron and his co-conspirator Victor Kane had moved forward, and both now faced a high-profile trial. The evidence was damning, and David had ensured that every piece of the puzzle was meticulously documented. Justice, it seemed, would finally be served. But for David, this wasn't just about punishment. It was about closure, about proving to himself and the world that no betrayal, no matter how deep, could break the spirit of integrity and innovation that defined his company. That morning, as David arrived at the office, he was greeted by Karen, his ever-reliable assistant, who handed him a schedule filled with meetings and events. At the top of the list was a final review of the company's latest product launch, a groundbreaking renewable energy system that had the potential to revolutionize the industry. "Everyone's excited about the launch," Karen said with a smile. "The media is already calling it a game-changer." David nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Let's make sure it lives up to the hype." As he walked to his office, he passed employees who greeted him with smiles and nods of respect. The atmosphere was vastly different from the tension and uncertainty that had gripped the company during Aaron's attacks. It was a reminder of how far they had come and how much stronger they were now. Later that day, David met with Emily in one of the glass-walled conference rooms overlooking the city. She was now leading the company's public relations team, a role she had stepped into with remarkable ease. Under her guidance, Callahan Innovations had not only recovered its reputation, but had become a model of transparency and ethical business practices. "Here's the final draft of the press release for the launch," Emily said, sliding a document across the table. "I also included a section highlighting the employees who contributed to the project. It's important to show this was a team effort." David skimmed the document, impressed as always by Emily's attention to detail. "This is perfect," he said. "You've really made a difference here, Emily." She smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "I just believed in what this company stands for, and in you." David looked at her for a moment, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I owe you more than I can say. If it weren't for you, I don't know where we'd be right now." Emily shook her head. "You don't owe me anything, David. This company, this team, it's a reflection of your leadership. We all just followed your example." As the day of the product launch approached, David found himself reflecting not only on the company's journey but on his own. Aaron's betrayal had forced him to reevaluate everything, not just his relationships but his values and his vision for the future. He had realized that building something meaningful wasn't just about success. It was about resilience, trust, and the willingness to adapt and grow in the face of adversity. The launch event was held at a state-of-the-art venue in the heart of the city, with hundreds of attendees, including industry leaders, media representatives, and investors. The energy in the room was electric as David took the stage, the spotlight illuminating him as cameras flashed. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady and confident. "Tonight is not just about unveiling a new product. It's about celebrating the people and the values that make innovation possible. It's about resilience, integrity, and the unwavering belief that together we can create a better future." He spoke about the challenges they had faced, carefully acknowledging the betrayal without dwelling on it. Instead, he focused on the strength of his team, the importance of collaboration, and the vision that had carried them forward. Finally, he introduced the product, the NovaGrid system, a revolutionary renewable energy platform designed to make clean energy accessible and affordable for everyone. The audience erupted into applause as the sleek prototype was unveiled on the stage, its design a testament to Callahan Innovations' commitment to excellence. In the days that followed, the NovaGrid system became a sensation, earning accolades from environmental organizations and industry experts alike. Orders poured in, and the company's stock soared to new heights. David's phone was constantly buzzing with messages of congratulations from colleagues and friends. But amidst the success, David remained grounded. He knew that true success wasn't measured by accolades or profits. It was measured by the impact they made and the values they upheld. Months later, as Aaron's trial came to a close, David sat in the courtroom, watching as the verdict was read. Both Aaron and Victor Kane were found guilty of fraud, corporate sabotage, and other charges. The judge handed down severe sentences, ensuring they would face the consequences of their actions. As David left the courthouse, he felt a sense of finality. The chapter with Aaron was finally closed. It was a bittersweet moment. He had lost someone he once considered a brother, but he had gained clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of purpose. Back at the office, the team gathered to celebrate the success of the NovaGrid system and the company's hard-earned stability. David stood at the center of the room, surrounded by employees who had become more than just colleagues. They were a family. "Thank you all for believing in this company and in each other," he said, raising a glass. "Together, we faced challenges that could have broken us, but instead, they made us stronger. Here's to the future and to the incredible people who make it possible." The room erupted in cheers, the sound a powerful reminder of the strength of unity and perseverance. That evening, as David sat alone in his office, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. He thought about Emily, whose courage had sparked the chain of events that saved the company. He thought about Julian, whose unwavering dedication had helped him uncover the truth. And he thought about the countless employees who had stood by him, proving that no betrayal could shake the foundation of what they had built together. As the city lights twinkled outside his window, David felt a sense of peace. He had weathered the storm, and in its aftermath, he had found not just success, but something far more valuable: redemption, resilience, and the enduring belief that with the right people by your side, anything was possible. David sat at his desk long after the celebrations had ended. The office was quiet now, the buzz of the day giving way to a serene stillness. A framed photo on his desk caught his eye, an image from the early days of Callahan Innovations, back when it was just him and Aaron brainstorming in a small, cluttered garage. For a moment, a wave of nostalgia washed over him, tinged with a bittersweet sadness. Aaron's betrayal had left scars, but it had also taught David invaluable lessons about trust, leadership, and resilience. As he stared at the photo, a knock on the door broke his reverie. It was Emily, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing a warm smile. "Figured you'd still be here," she said, placing a cup on his desk. David chuckled softly. "You know me too well. Thanks." She took a seat across from him, her expression thoughtful. "I was just thinking about everything that's happened over the past year. It's incredible how far we've come." David nodded, his gaze distant. "It is. But it wasn't just me. It was everyone. You, Julian, the team. I couldn't have done it alone." Emily smiled. "Maybe. But it takes a strong leader to keep everyone together when things get tough. That's what you've done." David looked at her, her words sinking in. "You've been a big part of that, Emily. I hope you know that." Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she held his gaze. "I'm just glad I could help." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the past year settling like a shared memory between them. Then Emily stood, brushing her hands on her jacket. "I should let you get some rest. Big day tomorrow." David raised an eyebrow. "What's tomorrow?" Emily smirked. "You really don't check your calendar, do you? It's the anniversary of Callahan Innovations' founding. The team's planning a surprise for you." "Well, it was a surprise." David laughed. "Thanks for the heads up. I'll act surprised." As she walked out, David felt a sense of calm. The company had weathered storms that would have sunk lesser organizations, and it had emerged stronger, with a renewed purpose and a brighter future. The next day, the anniversary celebration was in full swing. The entire team gathered in the company's central atrium, decorated with banners and photos documenting the company's journey. Employees shared stories, laughed, and toasted to their collective achievements. When it was time for David to speak, he took the stage, the room falling silent in anticipation. "Looking around this room," he began, "I see more than just colleagues. I see a family. A family that has faced challenges, stood together, and come out stronger on the other side." He paused, his voice steady. "This past year has taught me that success isn't about avoiding obstacles. It's about how we face them. It's about resilience, integrity, and the people who stand by you when it matters most." The crowd erupted into applause, their energy a testament to the unity that had carried them through the darkest times. As the celebration wound down, David found himself standing by the large windows of the atrium, looking out at the city. Emily joined him, her presence grounding. "You gave quite the speech," she said, her tone teasing. David chuckled. "It's easy when you have the right people to inspire you." They stood there for a moment, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, the city lights flickering on one by one. "What's next for Callahan Innovations?" Emily asked. David turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "We keep building. Not just products, but relationships, trust, and a legacy that goes beyond any of us." Emily nodded, her smile soft. "That sounds like a future worth fighting for." "It is," David said, "and I wouldn't want to do it without people like you." For the first time in a long while, David felt a profound sense of peace. The betrayals, the battles, and the scars had all led to this moment, a moment of clarity, purpose, and hope. As he looked ahead, he knew the journey was far from over, but he was ready. And with allies like Emily by his side, there was no limit to what they could achieve. Together, they would forge a future built on resilience, integrity, and the unwavering belief that the best was yet to come.